All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another London Power BI user group. Hopefully, this is going to be our last virtual one. Going forward, hopefully, we're going to have in person and a live event at the same time, or and a live event at the same time. So this week we are very excited. We have Ginger Grant here, and she will be talking about implementing a self-service Power BI solution. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a really good session. So for people who are new here, I'm Prati Kamasani and James Dales. We both run London Power BI user group. We've been running in London pretty much every month, and since pandemic, we've been doing virtually. And yeah, that's why we are here. So for the people who are not so new, who were there in the last session, I'm sure you may have experienced the great crashes. So for that reason, we have made some changes to this event. So as you may have seen, you are all muted and your videos are also blocked. You can obviously use the chat window to communicate, to share things. However, me and James will be closely monitoring the chat, and if we find anything inappropriate or anything, we will be deleting them and also kicking the people out immediately. And if you have a question, we would encourage you to use the chat window. But if you want to ask the question yourself, then you could raise your hand. Either me or James will make you a presenter, and so that you could ask your question. And yeah, I think. This session is going to be recorded. We will publish the session onto our YouTube channel whenever we finish with the editing, hopefully sooner than later. And all the references we get from the Ginger is going to be available under the references under the YouTube video and as part of the description. So the next event, we haven't finalized the date, the venue, or the time, or the speakers yet. We do have some ideas, but we are planning to do it along with the SQL bits so that we could do something there. But we haven't got any confirmation and things, but we're hoping that's how it's going to end up. But once we have a confirmation, we will announce it. Did I miss anything, James?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we're
all right. Yeah, let's hope it's all going to be under control. And thank you so much, Ginger. It was like I know we've been talking about this for a very long time, but finally happening. So very excited to have you here. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the chance to present in London and looking forward to the day that I can go back there. I'll be speaking virtually at bits, but virtually couldn't make the trek out there. So I wanted to do this talk primarily because this is something that I've heard a lot of from clients. It's one thing to say that, yeah, I do Power BI, but it's another thing to implement a self-service solution. Ideally, in this scenario, I assume that more people on this call would be the ones that would be setting this up, because you would be the one that probably have the knowledge for putting together a data model and writing DAX. As much as Microsoft has continued to make that a little bit easier than it has been in the past, it's not easy to put together your own data model or write DAX, especially if that's not your job. And you don't think it's your job either. You may be able to put together a report, but you don't necessarily know, what a dimensional model is. And I see that more and more in different environments. So companies are looking to implement this self-service solution as a way to implement something that business users who are non-technical can do it. What that means is technical people have to do a lot of work to make that happen. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. A little bit about me. My name is Ginger Grant, and as you can guess from the accent, I am from the U.S. I am from a place called Arizona, where it doesn't rain and it's warm a lot. So, which is great this time of year. Not so good in August when it's over 40. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. Wrote a book last year on cognitive services. Great, and I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. Great place to get a hold of me is on Twitter because I'm on there way too much at Desert Isle SQL. All right, so let's talk about self-service BI. And the first component that what we're going to need to make sure that we have is a friendly data model. So this is something that you're going to have to set up. And I'm not anticipating that for self-service BI, anybody's making up a data model. That's actually the one thing that really stymies users. I'm working with some users right now. We're learning Power BI, and guys at DBA, and bless his heart, he's right in there wanting to create a model, but he doesn't understand dimensional modeling. And while he will get there someday, his boss wants him to do reports right now. So with switching to a self-service Power BI model would make that happen. The other thing that is important to implement in this kind of a solution is having a good theme. More and more corporations have very definitive guidelines for what they want, specifying font and a look and feel. So one thing that you can really, that themes really provide is the ability to look really professional without necessarily knowing how you got there, because somebody else has set it up for you. And this is, of course, something that there's a lot of discussion on because it gets into design. And with that, that want to pivot into talking about releasable templates. So having a template that you provide everything you can to the user is a great starting point when doing self-service BI. It's very daunting to start with a blank slate, a blank page. Having a template, using templates, and encouraging your users to do that will really improve their ability to do Power BI, because they can see what's out there and then look at how they perhaps implement that in the reports that they're doing. And then the last thing that's really important to include is a feedback loop, because let's face it, as comprehensive as your solution may be, there's going to be things that need to change. Maybe you need a couple more DAX calculations. Maybe somebody wants to add another data source that's commonly used. How are you going to accommodate that? So keeping that feedback loop is really important to ensure that self-service is really working. So data-friendly model. This is kind of goes without saying, a lot of it with Power BI 101 kind of stuff, but it's really important to kind of like keep these rules in mind, because what you're trying to do is do your best to come up with something that users makes it easier for them to understand. So hide all your keys. They're not going to be using them for anything. They don't need them. They get to be confusing. Complete descriptions. Now, I will say that this is a kind of a sticking point, because I know how much time it takes, because I have been places where they wanted to describe everything in the model. There's two ways I've seen this work. One of them, the best way, they had an intern who basically entered everything, because it is very time consuming to complete all the places where you can describe it, so you can hover over it and see what a field contains. Another thing that you might consider doing, and I've seen this work as well, is create a glossary, or to provide people the understanding of where this stuff comes from. This also helps with adoption. A lot of times self-service BI people are probably ones that have written reports in Excel, and they're migrating from Excel to Power BI. And I see that there's a question where it says, what do I mean by keys? Basically, any relationship key that's not used in reporting. So for example, if I've got a product key, nobody needs to report on that. I'll be hiding that. Or if I have a distinct company ID, I'll be hiding that. That would be my key for my company, say, to connect to my sales table. And nobody needs to be reporting on those. If you need them for counts, again, you need to be creating all of the DAX. So you're going to be needing to create counts for that. So anything that you can to possibly make it easier for people. And that's one thing that you can do. Another thing, and this is dumb, but I've got this giant model right now that's got over 200 tables in it, and we're rolling out for SelfService BI. And we went through and we changed the way things were named because people didn't understand what the heck they were looking at. So developing names that people understand, oh, these things are related, it's really helpful because people then know where to find things based on how you've named them. So being really consistent on how you have things named is always really important. All right. Themes are a really important tool in making sure that your Power BI reports look good. And the whole idea for doing this is to make your business users feel successful without being really knowledgeable. So giving them tools to make them successful is really what you want to do. Can inputting columns and table descriptions being automated using tabular editor? So I don't know how you're going to automate it, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to provide a meaningful value. So I don't know how tabular editor would know that this is coming from the homegrown, you know, the homegrown sales system, and what it describes, because it's really what the descriptions need to include is the business knowledge. I have seen automated descriptions where they put in the calculations so that you can see what they are, and business users don't really find those meaningful. If you've got a calculation, it's more important that they know that this calculation is used on quarterly reports to determine productivity than the exact way that it's calculated. So I don't know any way that you could automate that. It's really because what you're trying to do is business knowledge. If you have a glossary, if you already have a glossary, that's great. If you've got that glossary someplace where you can publish it, then that will be really helpful for people to do. I have seen reports where they basically include a glossary report that they put in workspaces. I've also seen it where people put it as pages in the template so that people can take a look at what they are. I don't know of an automated way of adding those to description, though. If somebody does know, that'd be great. I just don't know that there is any way of doing that. It'd be great if there was a PowerShell script for that. I've seen some pretty inventive PowerShell scripts, but I don't know if there's a way of doing that for descriptions. So unfortunately. So themes, this gets to be really complex, especially if you are trying to show exactly how, the kinds of things that you need to do to get it to work. There's so many different ways that you can do themes. I've been working with someone who they hire somebody to come up with a look and feel and then implement that theme that they have sold the customers on and put that into a Power BI template. And the themes basically are going to include things for how you're going to make things look good. Now, the way there's more than one way of doing this, but how I tend to do it is I start with Power BI tips. I then customize in Power BI to make sure that I've got something that I can work with, and then because that's never going to take me as far as I want to go, I then edit the JSON, and I'll show you some things for how you can do that. So for editing JSON, what you're trying to do is provide default formatting for all elements. This gets to be really tricky, especially if you have a customer who is very specific about what font they want, which many are getting to be. And one thing that I really wanted to, we're going to take a look at this, but Matt Rudy has put up a GitHub repo, and that's something that I think that everybody really is who's getting into this ought to look at. I know there's also a book about the templates as well that I understand is pretty good. but the information in the repo is really top notch. And this can help you make sure that your Power BI reports are how you would think. So let's actually take a look at some Power BI instead of just talking about it. So when it comes to models, here's my Power BI report. Buried it in all the other things that I've got up. Seriously, where is it? Way too many things up right now. Oh, it crashed. That's lovely. I obviously did not pray enough to the demo gods because I'm having to restart Power BI because it's not happy. So one moment while I get that pulled up. While I get that pulled up, I'm going to talk about looking at Power BI tips in their advanced theme generator. I don't know how many people have used this, but I found that this is a really good resource that really helps getting started with a Power BI JSON file. Shout out to Mike Carlo and Seth Bauer for putting this together, because it's a very comprehensive place to start with your templates. Now, come on. Trying to get Power BI started here. There we go. So if this is actually where I would start off with this first, if you've not played around with it. As soon as I get Power BI working again, I had all these Power BI things up, and now I'm just have to kill them all and start again. So sorry about that. All right. So naturally, of course, when you are doing Power BI, you're going to have a separate you're going to have a separate model from your reports, and so then that's where you're going to be doing most of your work. So if I'm looking at my model here, I'm going to show you some of the things that I have implemented in this, then we'll start talking more about themes. So by the way, this is not what this talk is necessarily about, but I had a conversation with Adam Saxton over the summer where we were talking about the use of calculate tables. And I'm a big believer in always use calculate tables. And he was telling me, well, it depends on whether or not it impacts performance if you have them. And I said, well, that's sort of interesting. And I'm working on a giant tabular model. And oh, by the way, if you have a calculate table, it does not perform as well as when you have them in the tables. So that is an interesting side note when thinking about how to organize your DAX that you're using in your models. Make sure that it doesn't impact performance, because there is a better than even chance that if you have a very large data set, it will make a difference. So, and I would never even have thought to have tried that if I hadn't had that conversation with him. So give that a try. And see if there is a performance issue where, depending on where you have your calculations loaded, which is sort of interesting. So again, just basically being really thorough. You'll notice how many things that I have hidden here. All of my keys that I have. In my case, my keys are my primary IDs. If you are being good, you are going to make sure that you've got your descriptions here. Unfortunately, I ran out of time before I have them all, and I have an NDA on the one big model that I was using. But yeah, just make sure that you've got things that are anything that's a key pulled out, hidden. Yes, of course I need these keys, but nobody needs to do any reporting on them. Because I'm publishing my model and then my report is going to be using the model, nobody is going to be accessing this but me anyway. So just make sure that you've gone through and hidden things that you should hide, and also make sure that you have really good names where they've got spaces, etc. All right, so that's the data model. And of course, let's take a look at the report that I've set up as a template for using it, and we'll get into the themes that are applied to it as well as my sample report that I'm using Power BI. So, all right. So generally speaking, when I get into doing a theme anymore, somebody has already told me, hey, this is what you should be using. Perfect example, this company has theirs public, so I figure, hey, if it's public, then it's good to show. How they want their information presented. So they're telling you the hex colors, and they're telling you the order. I've been recently working with some developers, and they said, well, I don't like the order because the client that we're working on is got a ton of green, and it's not that visually appealing. But if somebody gives you a template and says, these are our guidelines, nobody really cares what your opinion is. If they have spent time and effort and marketing people with what they want the palette to be, yeah, that's what you're using, no matter what you might think of it. I will say that I have tweaked it a little bit because, of course, it's important to ensure that you are not violating any disability situations where you've got red-green issues. Also, if there is a problem with contrast, as in you can't tell two colors together which one's which, then you might tweak it slightly. But other than that, you're pretty much going to be using what you're given if this is what you're given. Yeah, and for the guys that told me, I'm like, well, I don't like the way they did it, and tough. If they have something like this, it's what you're going to need to follow. But it's relatively easy to implement something like this. And I use the theme generator to just as a starter for how I'm going to implement my model that's coming from here. So let me just kind of walk through the process for generating the theme, and then we can get into what we are going to be doing to tweak that theme so that it works in more situations. All right, so the first thing I'm going to be doing is adding the colors. I'm pulling these from here again. So what's nice about this is it doesn't care if you do multiple codes, if there are commas or not. So our hashtags are not, excuse me. So I can just go in and start adding my different colors. And again, the order that you enter them is the order that they are going to be used. So for this particular company, this dark blue is going to be the predominant color. This will be the color that you see whenever you put in a bar chart first. This is going to be what is coming up. So going back to this. And if where you're working, if they have not put a template together, the easiest thing to do is start pulling colors from their website, because no matter which colors you pick, and to be honest, I'm not a fan of most templates that I have seen, someone's going to say that they're going to be questioning, why you picked those colors and how could you possibly, use those because they're terrible, whatever. Well, if you say it's from the website, then that kind of stops it right there. But again, if you're really interested in the aesthetics, hire a graphic artist to put together a template for you. And they can also do things like put together like PowerPoints of how the layout should be. If that's really important to you, you can. I've also been at places where they're willing to pay for a light and a dark mode. That's great money if you can get it. If you want to do a dark mode, figure out the template, make sure that that's something that they would want. If you're going to do a dark mode, you're probably going to need to put those colors in yourself, because generally speaking, when you get one of these branding things, it's not designed for a dark mode. So you might have to work to develop what that is. So first off, I've got all of my colors here. So then I can just go to properties. And there's some default things that I could possibly pick here, but I'm gonna fill a couple of them in, but I know that I'm gonna have some issues with doing this, but I like to start with this so that I at least have like a baseline for when I'm going to be tweaking it later. So font size 8, no, I don't want it. The minimum I always want to be 10. I think 8 is just too darn small. And then there's the default title font family. So this can be a really interesting element, especially if, say, somebody like these guys have implemented that they want to use Georgia. So, and I'm certainly not going to go through every place that I could possibly do that. And so I want to put that as kind of my default, so that I can start implementing that everywhere. It'll automatically have the default color selected. I'm going to go ahead and select the blue. I can determine what I want the data labels to be. Say if I always want them to be a dark gray, I can do that. Whether or not I want drop shadow, I know some people really like it, some people don't. So this would just basically be a starter for my theme here. So I'm going to go ahead and download this. Now, I really kind of like this tool. There's a lot of things that you can play around with when you are putting together a theme. However, once it is complete, you're on your own for editing it. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to download the theme, and I'm going to call this London. And make sure that I have that. Could find it. We'll take a look at that theme because it's pretty involved. This one's going to be called London. So I'm going to go ahead and open this file. And it's going to do this in Visual Studio, which I don't want. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. So the easiest place that I found for editing JSON, it's not what it's trying to open right now, but in Notepad++. So it works out pretty well for doing it. I'm going to go ahead and make this go away. The problem that you get into with VS Code is a lot of times this isn't formatted that great. You may need to format it. So I'm just going to go ahead and open the London theme here. And you can see that it didn't put in any spaces. So I've got a, generally speaking, there's, if you want it to look so you can actually read it, number of different format JSON editors, or I can, basically paste this and make sure that it is formatted nicely. Put this back into here. So here's basically what I've got in my theme so far. I've got my data colors, I've got visual style that's Georgia, and that's about it. Well, this is a starting spot for this, but it's certainly not where all that I will probably end up going with this. So after this, if I'm looking at formatting, I'm going to end up going to this GitHub site. So did I put this in chat? Another useful website, if you go to Someone's Not Picking Colors, the palettes are the good ones. Yeah, those can be really good as well. Good call, Bernard. A lot of times, though, that anymore, people are being very dictatorial on how they want things, but great call. So here's all of the different things that you could possibly pick for how you want it. And he's got some great thoughts about this. And I don't know anybody who likes JSON because it can be so picky. And also, I have found that this can be really daunting. Like, for example, when I was trying to make sure that my matrix was formatted appropriately, I got problems when I was pasting in there, and you're thinking, "Gosh, I'm such an idiot! I can't even paste this right." But you may have problems with it working in your environment. So here would be the JSON that you could possibly use for the if you're looking at formatting your matrix template. And this is one that I would definitely format and make because it's got default colors that aren't going to be yours because of the default colors. And the different elements that you can use, how you want the row headers. This is actually something that I teach a lot of Power BI classes, and every single time somebody gets into using the matrix or the table control, they're like, "Oh, how do I fix it? Because the font is so small." And I always make the fonts bigger because the defaults are just so small that people have problems reading them. So definitely, look at the site. How I found the way to that is most productive when I'm tweaking this theme. If I look at my file here, so this is the one that I've been using, is what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at different sections. So the first section that I tend to do is, obviously I think it's important to do this in order. We've got your standard visual styles section here. And I've also got what I want for good, neutral, and bad. So that's probably what I'm going to start with on the font that I just downloaded from Power BI Tips, is looking at what I want for good, neutral, and bad. And then text classes, if I know that I'm going to be using, say, the Georgia font that they specified, what size I want titles, what size I want headers, what size I want labels. So all of that, you can find it here to look at how you can put this all together. So, looking at, at these different elements, finding things that you want, and then pulling them out. So you can look and see how they're set. There's a fact, but if you are starting to do it, you can look at the different ways that you can possibly tweak this, and then start tweaking it in your model. So looking at the different kinds of things. So if we look at what I've got in the one that I made for my Acme customer, we're setting the fonts in labels, headers, titles, and we're setting good, neutral, and bad. These are their data colors that they're doing. You can put your name of the company that you're working for so it's named in there. Visual, I'm just basically making sure again that I've got Calabri. I'm also have the ability to add a background color, kind of a nice thing to do. Gives it a kind of a good visual look and feel. I'm telling it here that I want the filter card to always have a background color. I want it to be 25% transparent, so it's not that dark. Page, I'm giving it a solid color with a 75% transparency. So all of these are going to be implemented when I use this font. So this is immediately going to provide a good look and feel, follows the company standards. Users don't have to know anything. I will say that this took me better part of a day to put together. And to be honest, I'm still tweaking it because there's still some things that I think I need to add to it. So, and I will say this is horribly painful because I suck at JSON and getting all of these different curly brackets and comments and things. And I'm just basically going to this GitHub and pasting the different elements in, tweaking them how I want, testing it, and making it work. So that's the process that you need to do basically to come up with a template. And this way you're really making it look good, because a lot of the things that you're trying to help your users with is so that it doesn't look like they just came back from a Power BI, dashboard in a day class. Give them something that looks good, and then they'll be more encouraged to continue using Power BI. And again, a lot of this stuff with self-service Power BI is a sales job, because frankly, many of these people would just rather do it all in Excel. So giving them tools to make them successful is really a part of what's going to make this template process successful. And that means you're going to be tweaking your JSON to in themes, because that's how you're going to make that happen. So, and I haven't met Matt Rudy, but if I do, I owe him a beer, because this saved me a whole lot of time. The other reference that you can look at is, of course, Microsoft's themes, which tells you more about the JSON format. I'll go ahead and put that into chat too. This shows you the defaults. Never been a default theme person, because somebody always wants to tweak it. And again, I'm always getting these color things now where you're like, you shall have this and you shall have that. So making that work. But this kind of shows you how you can customize the themes. And that is the next step that I do once I've got my theme, I think, created, because then I can just have Power BI tweak things for me. So let me go ahead and open up Power BI again and show you how I'm going to get it to tweak my theme for me, so that I can make sure that it's another step that I can do, so I can write less JSON. One thing that I really like that you can do when you're customizing the theme that I think really makes it look pretty is if you can say, start tweaking the filter and making the filter so that it is something that is colored, kind of makes it pop. And that is something that you can definitely do in Power BI. So let me go ahead. All right, so just an example on implementing my theme. I've got a one-page report here, and I want to just basically start with implementing my theme. Again, going to View, down arrow. I'm going to browse for my theme. Start with my London theme here, and notice it tweaked all of my colors. Don't like the way that it did that, so I'm going to obviously be doing some more tweaking to get it to change. Now notice that sometimes it did do my font for Georgia, so I'm going to want to make sure that every place that I specify it, so I've got that Georgia font all the time, because if I have to go in every single time and tweak it, I'll go bonkers. So let's look at what I can do to customize the current theme. And this shows you what I've got for name and colors. For looking at negative and positive, when you're doing these, you want to be really sure that the color differences are something, if you're going to go with these, that will work for colorblind. There's a couple of colorblind websites that you can do to validate that your reports are following standards. So highly recommend that you look online to make sure that your colors are accessible to people who have color blindness. So funny. I was talking to this client about that, and I said, it's important to design things for accessibility. And they said, oh, we don't know that we have anybody that's colorblind, and that doesn't really matter to us. 2 days later, they found out that there's an executive in their company who's colorblind and doesn't like the reports. So now they care. So you just never know. So now they're really interested in making sure that it's accessible because of who's colorblind. And a lot of times that's what it takes. So here under text, again, this is in the customized theme, just to show you where I got that. So I've implemented my theme and I want to customize it so that I have to write less JSON. So I'm going to, so it's pulling my themes. Going to advanced, I can change the first level elements. If I'm going to do this, I probably want to go back to my report colors that I have listed here, making sure that, you know, colors that I'm picking are within their themes, not just some random stuff, for example. And then, you know, so that I can change them. Text, here's another place that I can make sure that I've got this Georgia font everywhere. And again, picking it every place that I can, so I have to write less JSON to tweak it later. And this is just another place that you can go ahead and tweak this, and I will be doing that. Because there's so many different places that you need to have this set. Now, visuals, whether or not there's background by default, whether or not there's borders by default, background color header, and tooltip and tooltip colors. For the page, what I can do if I want to make sure that I've got a page background, I can go ahead and add it. And a lot of times I do add just a real light background, just something that's not white. I think it makes for a good look. And then, you know, you could do something slightly darker for a page background. So you just so that you can see the difference. So make it 100% transparent. Not gonna be able to see it. So this is what I've just added for that. See what I've changed it so far. So now look, now I've got everything in Georgia. I don't like what I just did to my card, so I might want to tweak that. So again, this is the current theme. And probably going to want to go in and tweak these cards in the JSON. Filter pane, this is something that I think really kind of looks cool if you tweak this, and this is something that you can definitely do. So I'm going to grab this bright green here. Go back, add this, and say apply. All right, so now I've got a bright green filter so you can definitely see it. Now, this is going to be my new JSON, so I want to save this theme. So instead of London, I'm going to call this one London 2. And now if I look at my different themes, this is my London theme. And if we look at my, go back and look at the London 2 and fix it because it never comes in how I want it. Come on. I don't know why it's all jacked up like this. There. Paste. Wow. Yeah, come on. Obviously, I'm failing cutting and pasting, but edit. It's a lot longer. And it looks a lot different than what I had before. So I'm all about the making things easier. However, I think it added all these other data colors that I don't care about. So even the tools that help you, yeah, you kind of want to tweak them after the fact because this is now way too many colors. But I do have Georgia in more places, and I've got some things to start playing out. So then I can, when I'm going to GitHub and tweaking it with all of these different elements, I could definitely want to tweak the card so that it looks appropriate, more how I want it. Then I can, you know, start looking at how to make this more like what I think my users are going to want from a design perspective. Generally speaking, the steps that I use from a business perspective is I get the whoever thinks they're in charge of marketing to improve the design, and I do that in Power BI and then take the step to tweak it all in JSON because I don't want to write a whole bunch of JSON if they're like, yeah, we don't like that like formatting thing you did. So definitely keep that in mind. Do it in Power BI before you go this far with it, but definitely something that you can do. After all this work, do you still use PowerPoint to add a background layout and some logos and grouping? So Yes, actually, I end up doing that. I add the backgrounds for that, and you are segueing into something else because this is just doing that aspect of it. And I'm sure there probably is a way, I don't know what it is, to do backgrounds, but I don't know how it is. So let's talk to the next thing that I do. So I got my theme done. I'm good with my theme. So then the next thing that I want to do, given exactly what Fernando says, is I want to make sure that I've got a background. And a lot of times I put the company logo on the background. I'll put the, like, this data is considered confidential, blah, blah, whatever the appropriate verbiage that I have to do. And this is, again, I'm trying to do self-service BI. So I want to provide something that people can start out with that they are going to want to use. So I want to demonstrate the standards. So it's going to have my template within it. It's going to include the data source because, again, I want them to use this. And then it'll have things like colored backgrounds and samples of things that they can do so that they know, oh, I can do that. How do I do that? And somebody to show how that works. So I create a template. Now, for those of you who've never created templates, watch closely. It's really, really hard to do. You just have to do File, Save As a template. Once I have this saved as a template, that means that anybody can open it up and they'll get a blank version of it. I was looking on there's some documentation that Power BI had that was telling people that they needed to import it. Just once you have it saved as a PBIT file, you can just go ahead and click on it. You don't have to like fancy import stuff. Just tell people to click on your template, and which is a PBIT file, and then you're good to go. So in here, this is where I would put things like, telling people, hey, we've decided as a corporation that we are going to have all of our titles here at the bottom. So this is where they are. And give people different styles of reports that they might want to look at, So people like consistent reports. So when it comes to things like dates, slicers, you want to basically provide people something that they can copy so they don't have to like figure all this out themselves. You'll notice that I've got a gradient background that I have included for the page, and I've got something separate for the wallpaper, which is just actually a color. So I do have a gradient background. I created my gradient background from Gradient File Creator online. So I didn't necessarily do it in PowerPoint. I used a tool that web developers use for creating gradients, but that's definitely something you can use. So the purpose of this template file is basically to tell people, hey, look, here's all your calculations, here's your model, and these are some different ways that you can start working so that they can see, oh, I've got my slicers here, I've got my cards here, I can just start working. So also, I thought to provide people like some training, like a follow-up kind of thing, because for example, let's say that they're unfamiliar with how drill down works. So I've provided a sample here so that they can see how I can do a drill down or drill up in this case, so that they can see how these different things work. So giving it to them so that they can implement it themselves because they have a working model to make this work. I also provide things like drill through. I know a lot of people think that this is really hard, or they haven't even heard of drill through. So by providing a template where you've got it, really helps people in their goal to be better self-service people because you're giving them the examples. Ideally, I've also done different ones of these. I've done some that I have a whole bunch of text in there so that they say how to do it with the steps in there just as a text box. So just say, this is a drill. This is an example of a drill through. To learn how to spell. So you can just put things like this so that people will see, oh, okay. And then they can start doing these concepts by themselves because they have a starter place to go. This would also might be a place where I would add my glossary. And if it's in the template, then they have the ability to see it all the time as text. And that if you don't get an intern that you can use to slavishly enter all of your descriptions, great place to get that to work, to make sure that that's how it's going to be. Now, in my definition of a self-service BI, I'm not expecting people to write decks. I'm not expecting people to do the models. What I do expect that they want to do is basically stuff like they want to do slicers, and they want to do charts, and they want to see how they can do things. I did have a fancy tooltip that I added on this so that people can see, how do I do this? And have examples that they could possibly follow. A lot of times people don't remember what the thing is called, and what options are available. If you want to have, I find that select all is really easy for people to understand. So just basically doing that. So again, and what this does, if I look at my File Explorer for this, is here you'll notice that it's got a PBIT suffix added to it. And this is the one that I'm editing right now is the PBIX. So if I wanted to use this PBIT file, which I distribute to people, and say, look, this is where you need to start. So when they click on it, if you've not used these before, what I really like about these is it's not like how it is with like Word. It automatically gives them something that says untitled. So they've got a place that they can start working their version of a report, and they are free to go from there. So it can be really a great starting point. They can feel really successful because they can start changing this up and making their own stuff. All right, so roles and responsibilities. So that I'm making some assumptions here, and this is generally see how it works. Users don't create measures. They can't add any data to your model. They are basically using what you have provided, and they're doing clicky, draggy, droppy things, because that's the self-service model. They may not understand the model. You may need to, again, glossaries, maybe some mentoring sessions. But if you give them examples, then they might be able to see how it works, and they don't have to worry about breaking things. But really, to make this successful, you're going to need to provide a feedback loop, because I don't care what you did, somebody's going to want to change it. They're going to want new measures because you don't have the da-da-da-da measure that's so important, right? All right, how's that going to get added? Who's going to add it? When is that going to happen? What is the process for adding content? What if there's a Excel spreadsheet that sales has to have as part of the model? Or how are you going to make it so that that things can be added to the model, tweaked to the model? Maybe you need to change the data refresh. All of these things are important elements that you need to ensure that you're incorporating so that you've got feedback for people and they feel like that they're still being supported, even though you're pushing all the reporting onto them. Also, what are you going to do with workspaces? Because great, people can create reports. Okay, how are they going to create apps? Are they going to create apps? Are you going to basically manage the workspaces? How are you going to do that? What's going to be the company policy? Now, a lot of places that I know will basically provide them the tools they need so that they can start doing apps. Some places say don't allow them to do that. Once it's in a once it's done and in a workspace, they handle they might create a development pipeline off of that workspace and move different content to different workspaces to release it. There's different ways that you could possibly set up your workspaces. Maybe they're just doing this for ad hoc purposes and they just need everything in the workspace for their department. Again, all of these are possible solutions, but you're going to have to figure that out because that's definitely got to be part of what's going on with a self-service solution. So make sure that you incorporate that in your process, because it's not enough. Whoops. It's not enough just to be able to do that. All right. I also flip-tailed slides here. Oh, that's weird. All right. So in summary, take time to make your model friendly. You know, put descriptions in, hide things that people are not going to need. I know some places where they do not let people do any kind of implicit calculations. They take all of the anything out and just include measures. That's kind of extreme, but I've seen that done. Take time to develop the theme so that it'll look good, and the theme will incorporate the elements that the corporation wants to look, so that people will be successful in having something that looks pretty and doesn't look like somebody who's very color challenged, which I've definitely seen. Create a usable template. Give people a starting spot that they can use, that they can tweak, that they can learn from, that has the data created, so they don't have to like, oh, I don't know where the data lives. Don't let them have to worry about that. Just give them a working connection to the data that they need to use. This may mean multiple templates. If you've got multiple data sources, again, make it simple, but give them the PBIT files and say, yeah, just open that and tweak anything you want. And then develop process for adding different elements, and then how you're going to handle releases, because that's definitely something that you're going to have to figure out. And that's going to be something that's part of the feedback process and something that you're going to need to coordinate with management. All right. Any questions? I know I'm probably running up against time. So, one, hi Ginger, do you advocate one large model across company data as opposed to by business function? No, I do not like the Lord of the Ring models. Now that we have composite modeling, I really hope to implement that more places. And also, I think it's easier the less data that people have. If you give people everything, they tend to get confused. The smaller models can be easier to maintain. So definitely multi-models. Fernando, self-service BI is always taken with a grain of salt. All the governance is done in a previous layer of the BI strategy. Oh yeah, oh yeah. That's basically, you're just giving them the model that somebody else created for them, that somebody else is making sure that has the appropriate levels of data. All of the measures have been checked. And if there's an underlying problem with the data, that's still the underlying problem with the data. So that's definitely something that, you know, as a Power BI developer, you're not responsible for all the data, no matter what anybody tells you. So that process still needs to happen if the data is wrong. I think I'm like a minute over here, but that is time. So thank you very much for attending. Really appreciated being part of the user group.
There we go, Mike. My turn for my camera not to work there.
Right,
Ginger, thank you so much. It was a great session, some brilliant advice, resources, tools and techniques there.
Yeah, that GitHub's awesome.
Absolutely. Got lots there for us to go and explore afterwards too. So as you may have picked up in the chat, and I'll paste it again in a moment, we did record this session. So if you want to go back and recap on anything that Ginger covered during the session, then I will attempt to get this posted up on YouTube as quickly as I possibly can. I'll aim for tomorrow. If it isn't tomorrow, there may be a bit of a week delay, but hopefully I'll get there quickly. So let me just very quickly share my screen if I can get the window back open. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So everything's all over the place. There we go. So here's a link to find the video. Once I hopefully get it posted up there tomorrow, I'll paste it in the chat as well, so you can cut and paste it. We'll also make sure that it is shared across our social media as well. As Prafi mentioned at the start, we haven't quite got next month's meetup fully organised yet, either in terms of presenters or location or time, but we're hopefully going to have it all timed up with SQL bits. I guess the idea is probably we'll have it on the Thursday evening to capitalise on lots of people being in London who are all there for the data community and for Power BI. So we'll see what we can do, and we will update and get the event set up on Meetup, and it will get announced on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So I think that's everything. Thank you ever so much for joining. I think we had well over 100 people throughout the session, so really great turnout. I hope the new format was okay for everybody, and you didn't mind being forced to have your cameras and mics off throughout. But we didn't get any interruptions, so that's it's a great news. So it obviously worked from that front. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you next month. And thanks again, Ginger. Really,
thank you. Really
appreciate
speaking.
Thank you, Ginger.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.